Heyo, what's going on, everybody? This is John Dudley on John Dudley Speaks, the podcast. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I am very excited about this episode. Lots going on that I wanted to cover for this movie, Challengers. Now, I know what you're thinking. Challengers, isn't that the movie with Zendaya and the devil's threesome in it? And yes, it is. But there are layers. There are really cool shots. There's tennis in it, a lot of tennis. So I'm going to be breaking down my thoughts on the movie. I have a review up now on Substack. Go check that out. But yeah, I'm going to get into just some overall themes about the movie, what I thought about Luca Guadagnino's direction on it as well. He's a very well-known director, kind of steering into a more commercial lane, so it's very interesting seeing him go from more art film, call me by your name type stuff into something so mainstream. So we're going to get into that, but first, before we get into anything, just some major news going on. News that I'm going to start off with that is not in the film and television category, something a lot more music adjacent. The ongoing Kendrick Lamar-Drake beef has been melting down the internet recently. It is incendiary. It has become to the point where I don't know, it's getting unmanageable to the point where I think Kendrick Lamar has taken such a huge lead that Drake is just embarrassing himself at this point just by, baiting him and being involved. The beef started late March when Kendrick Lamar dropped the Like That verse and essentially invited there to be a response. Drake responded in mid-April, and then Kendrick has just been on a tear, has released 3 diss songs, all huge winners at Drake. Drake also released a response track, but it kind of got lost in the middle of the swarm that was Kendrick's responses. And apparently he has more. So at the time of recording this, he might have released more. I know he just released Not Like Us at the time of recording this, and it's likely that he's got more up his sleeve. So we'll see how that goes. It's an amazing thing that we're witnessing. This is the biggest hip-hop beef that we've seen since Jay-Z and Nas. And this might be one of the most brutal ones out there, given the allegations that have come out about it, about Drake. Some about Kendrick, too. So it's the mudslinging has turned very personal, and I can only see it getting uglier from here. But moving on to something lighter and certainly not as incendiary and inflammatory. The MCU just cast the legendary Giancarlo Esposito in a role that is undisclosed right now. They say it is a new original role, and Giancarlo Esposito, Breaking Bad, The Boys, The Mandalorian, very well-known, award-nominated actor. This is a huge win for the MCU. I'm just hoping that they don't mess it up. Just from my perspective, my point of view, I think if you're going to put Esposito in a role, do not typecast him as a villain, because he's done it over and over. He's proven that he can do it. He doesn't need to do it again. And honestly, I don't think he wants to. Put him in something that's a little bit more complicated, morally gray. I think that's interesting. I don't think that he's going to be in anything this year. I think it's likely something in Thunderbolts that's a government role. What I'm hoping for is that they give him something interesting to do. I don't want him to be that guy that is just, government official number one that takes a supporting backseat, but is also maybe, a secondary villain or a secondary, like a resource for Captain America or something like that. I really hope that he gets something that's a little bit more on the mystical side. Like, I'd love to see him in Agatha House of Hardness or whatever it's called. I think they changed the title like 5 times now. But I'd love to see him in a role that is a lot more like away from what's happening on Earth in the MCU and something that's a little bit more like on the cosmic, mystical side. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. I do think it is going to be Thunderbolts, though, just given how that movie is stacking up right now. And moving on, last thing on the news segment, Cobra Kai. We're getting a final season, and it's split into 3 parts because there's no way in hell Netflix is not going to milk this thing dry. I mean, think about it. This is one of the biggest Netflix shows that has ever hit the platform. You know, when they took it off of YouTube Red and season 3 was, you know, Netflix original. I mean, the viewing figures on this are insane. And that's with good reason. It's a great show. I really enjoy it still. I think season 5 lacked a little bit of the bite that something like season 4 had. Season 4 was awesome. But it looks like they are really gearing up for this 6th season to be pretty explosive. The trailer looks great. Part 1 drops in July of this year. Part 2 drops in November. And then part 3 is going to be next year. So really hoping that whatever they're doing, that they're not like stretching it out for the sake of stretching it out, or not just for the sake of stretching it out. But I'm hoping that they're doing it because they have a lot of, you know, heavy material that they're going to hit throughout those 3 parts. So it should be explosive. It should be exciting. So I'm very, very enthused about that. But moving on into the episode, Challengers. Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. I think I'm saying Luca's name right. This movie's been heavily marketed for about a year. The strikes did push it back. I believe it was supposed to come out September 23, and they pushed it to April because of the strikes, which, you know, that's kind of what happened with Dune Part 2, yet another Zendaya-led project. And, you know, I could see a world where this comes out in like last year, along with Dune Part 2, you know, if the strikes didn't happen, and this maybe wouldn't have hit as well in the fall. But for some reason, the spring release date kind of fits this movie more when it comes to its aesthetic, its overall vibe and tone, and just like how odd this movie is for a commercial, like $50 million romantic drama juggernaut. This movie's going to be very successful. It's already been pretty successful, and I think, you know, I think Zendaya is also in Oscar contention. Absolutely. Just getting into the layers of it that I liked, which I like this movie a lot. In my review, I gave it a 9.1, and you know, that's mainly because of the writing and the direction. But you know, you can't rule out the amazing performances here. I think Zendaya is a commanding central performance. She plays someone that is very complicated, very real. Someone that is not an idol in any way. And she's not painted to be. And I think that's what the point was. This movie could have been about anything. It could have been about, you know, a corporate merger. It could have been about, you know, like, I don't know, she could have been involved in the government or something. It could have been any setting, but the characterizations work because the characters are well written. You know, like, it's not because of tennis that this is interesting. It's the characters that make the tennis interesting. So I think Zendaya, once again, very good performance here. She toes the line between almost being sympathetic to her disappointment and her disenchantment, but then she's also kind of indefensible. She's a power-hungry human being. So when you kind of take that top of the pyramid of these three performances, and then you go down to Art and Patrick, played by Mike Feist. I think it's Feist or Feist. I can't remember how you pronounce his last name. He's getting up there now in terms of like credibility and recognition. I'd say. I think he's scheduled to be in some more films coming down the line. So him and then Josh O'Connor from The Crown playing Patrick, the two of them, it's interesting because seeing the way that Zendaya's character branches off into the two of them, they then have their tethering to each other, but then also how they branch out and what their actions and their paths signify is really something that I feel like a romantic drama does not tend to get into often when it comes to the co-leads or the second leads. You're usually getting more depth with someone that is like, the main character, like a Zendaya. But the fact that all three of them kind of feel like they are owning this movie, I think it's really interesting. I think Mike and Josh are excellent. I would actually venture to say Josh has the best performance of the film. And I think he should get a lot more roles after this because he's just so dynamic, and body language is everything in this movie. It says a lot. And when you couple that with Luca's very odd blocking of scenes, I think Josh has this screen presence that is just very uncomfortable, but like just grounded and authentic. I just, anytime he was on screen, I loved seeing him on screen, especially like his solo scenes. It felt like there was something he was saying without saying it. But getting into that, this movie, obviously, its main marketing appeal was just the sexuality revolving around these characters. And the central one was the three-way kissing scene that happened in the film. And yes, in the movie, it's kind of played for laughs. I won't lie. I laughed a lot because it's not really played for anything sexy, and that's kind of what's getting to my point is that the sex appeal of this movie isn't through like physical attraction and physical intimacy. It's through emotional intimacy and emotional literacy. And what I mean by that is the connections that are fostered between these three characters. You find it to be a lot more intimate and attractive when they are emotionally engaging with one another on an intellectual basis, trying to understand one another. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I feel like they're always trying to, like all three of these characters, trying to understand what the other is thinking and how will they respond to that in a way that suits their desires. So that's where I think the sex appeal of this movie lies, is that, these people are mysterious. They have ulterior motives, but we're not fully embracing them because it's not, like outright said to us. And I think that's something that a lot of scripts nowadays miss, is that, you don't have to spell out to someone, like an audience member, what someone's motive is as a character. You just have to feel as an audience member like that there is a motive, and it could be, up to interpretation. In this case, I feel like everyone's motive here is to gain some sort of power, and they have a lot of desperation. In order to gain that power, they're trying to quell their desperation. So in the process of that, there is a lot of, there's sexual dynamics that happen between Zendaya and Mike, between kind of Mike and Josh and Zendaya. So it's just very intriguing watching them, not in a sexual sense, but watching them try to just play out each other's moves. And because in the in the sexual scenes, it feels like they're trying to play a mind game with each other. But in the scenes where they're not in that situation, it's almost like they're trying to deeply understand each other. And what I mean by literacy is, she tests them on really, what is tennis to you guys? What is this game to you? And she mentions how tennis is a relationship. And that really serves as a metaphorical umbrella for this movie, where tennis is just a backdrop. It's all about our relationships and connections. So through that literacy of understanding the importance of the sport and not just how to hit a ball with a racket, I feel like there's closeness there when they all start to like respect her game a little bit more, and respect how she respects it. And the flashbacks really do help us guide or help guide us through that idea and that kind of philosophy that Luca is trying to get through to us. So it's really interesting. I find the sex scenes to be hollow, and they're purposefully hollow, and that's what makes them so interesting and not appealing in a sexual sense. Like I said, the appeal comes from just the emotional tethering, which then again, you think the director here and the writer as well, they have the right mindset in place here. They're telling you a story about people that are kind of trying to get one over on each other. And then once they're in like secure places, maybe one of them feels like he's in a secure place, that security is shown to be fragile because desire trumps nearly every other theme in this film. It's not meant to show that these characters are good, and nor does it, but it shows how the characters could be good, and that's through the emotional connection and intimacy. So really like that aspect of the movie. But what really allows that to pop off is the style of it. Luca goes God mode with his visuals. This is a gorgeous movie to look at. It's so bright. Like the movie is lit so well, and I can't believe I'm saying that because recent films, especially Marvel movies, they light their sets just so like abnormally. And there's this manufactured view of, especially Star Wars shows too. And I'm not like, gonna get into Star Wars overall quality because I like those shows. I love The Mandalorian. I think Andor is a beautiful show to look at, but the ones that I'm talking about are the ones where they use the volume, where you have Obi-Wan Kenobi and you have Book of Boba Fett, which I like those shows, but there's a synthetic aspect to it where it doesn't feel like you're watching something that's naturally on the screen like that. There's no visual aesthetic there that is consistent because it's all flat lighting. And sure, I think some people would disagree with me for that, and I think it does come to personal taste. But seeing it in big budget movies recently, like Indiana Jones, horribly lit movie. It's not a nice movie to look at. It's clunky and ugly, and it's because there's no natural locations. There's no like attention to detail on the lighting setup and how it affects the blocking. So Luca here, just like Denis Villeneuve and Dune Part 2, really pays attention to how can I light a scene to tell a story. And I really think the scene where they're all having a conversation on the beach, in a movie that comes out last year or year before, like major movies that are not directed by well-known indie directors, this movie is going to be lit horribly. There's going to be no backlighting. You're not going to see the expressions of the characters because it's just going to be so focused on the mood, and the mood is going to be driven by the aesthetic, which will be black. In this case, we get a little bit more blue and white splashed in there, And the backlighting honestly makes this thing pop just so beautifully. And it allows us to see Zendaya on screen and see actually just how beautiful this woman is. And I think that's actually something that people have commented on, is that like Challengers is the first movie to actually show us how gorgeous of a woman Zendaya is. And that's because the technical side is just taking really simple steps to ensure that this movie like looks appealing, looks as luxurious as it's suggesting that it is in its marketing. And that gets all the way down to the tennis scenes. The tennis scenes in this movie are absolutely fantastic. The final match point, better than most blockbuster films that have come out in the last 4 years. I stand by that. It is electric. The amount of shots that Luca goes through, not just to tell us a story, because there are shots in there that tell us a story, but the shots are so dynamic and creative. There's one of them where you are the tennis ball and you're flying around like, and my wife turned to me, she's like, "This makes me dizzy. I don't like that." I'm like, "I get that. It's weird." But there's one where you are looking from the POV of the player that's playing tennis, and you get to see like just the shakiness and the intensity of the match. And that's the kind of stuff in action films that I feel like we've been lacking for a long time. Aside from like a John Wick or an Extraction, there's no like dynamism there. And this was like, this is a romantic drama about sports, yet I feel like this has more action than a lot of films that have come out on Netflix recently. So, yeah, I loved that. I thought Luca just, he flexed on everybody with the split triopter shot that, I mean, it's gratuitous, but the thing is, the movie itself is lavish in its style, so it needs to be gratuitous. It calls for it. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Luca's direction here is masterful. The blocking is so weird. And what I mean by that is that the way the shots are composed, it almost feels like the way he switches back and forth between shot, it's like a volley between the two characters, that we're seeing them play tennis in their minds, and it turns in, that kind of plays into the whole idea of tennis as a relationship. That's like the core theme of the film. Yeah, so because I was trying to figure out, why is the editing of this so weird? Why is the like blocking and like the shot composition just like, sometimes it's in the corner, but then like the continuity of the shots change, and you're kind of looking at the eye line a little bit. You're like, why is this guy's eye line going this way? And then when you cut back, it's like odd and abrupt, and it's like, oh, it's supposed to be a volley between them. They're all playing tennis with each other. When that clicked while I was watching the movie, my jaw dropped. I was like, holy shit, this is actually genius, because it's a purposeful diversion. The director here is looking at us and saying, I know this is going to look weird. I know this is going to feel weird, and it's supposed to. So that intentionality is really interesting. And then lastly, before I get to my conclusion, this is going to be a short episode. I wanted to really just bottle up all my thoughts and throw them out here, because I really have nothing else to say but like good things about this movie. There are things where it doesn't fully work, like maybe the plot doesn't fully gel, or some of the pacing lags a little bit here, but overall, I mean, this movie is just such a breath of fresh air. And the reason why is because it really takes genre pastiche and kind of throws caution to the wind with it. There are so many shots in this movie, so many angles and tones that Luca employs, telling us a different story through a shifting of the lens. And that lens can sometimes be a 50s slapstick comedy, where when the guys are younger, it feels like a 50s Jack Lemmon type comedy, like a Some Like It Hot type thing. I loved that. Very His Girl Friday type thing. It's just very kooky and weird, and yet very accessible and fun. There's a lot of people in my theater that were laughing a lot during this movie because there's also elements of 80s sex comedies like Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks. There's just like this little tinge of raunchiness, but the earnestness is on top of it, so it comes off as a lot more charming, even though it's dealing with stuff that's a little bit more risque and adult. So I liked that a lot. It was very risky business to me. Then when we shift out of their youth and into them being in their 30s, back and forth, we get tinges of an erotic thriller, like a Basic Instinct. There's like haunting notes in there of, like slasher horror that are like, obviously there's no horror in this movie, but it's trying to tell us something through doing obvious genre like homages. And for me, like, just as someone that has always just adored the idea of paying tribute to other types of film throughout the years, I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the screen. I absolutely loved it. It was just the playing on the idea of like what's going on these in these people's minds is just fully on screen. That way the script doesn't have to do so much work to tell you. Really a masterful pairing between Justin and Luca on this. So the fact that this movie was like a time capsule for other genre pastiches, but also operates as its own new sleek, slick thing. That's what really made me gravitate towards it. So I love this movie. I think the shallow purpose of this movie is that, tennis is analogous to sex and genuine emotional connection and intimacy. But I think the deeper meaning here is that the intersectionality of this trio proves out how a self-leaning setting can illuminate one's true ambitions. And sometimes those ambitions are not going to be something that's positive. And I think that's very challenging, not to be on the nose, but I think that is a challenging theme to kind of throw into your mainstream audience. So I love this movie. I think it's great. It's definitely going to be one of the best movies of the year in terms of like mid-budget dramas. It's going to be up there. It's going to do well. And I think everybody that was involved in this movie did a great job. My line delivery of the week for this one, when Zendaya says, "You don't know what tennis is," it really hits the core root of this movie, because that line echoes and reverberates throughout the rest of the movie. I'm not going to tell you why or like what culminates and how that line means something to the end of the film, but I do think that is just that will go down in my book as like an iconic line from this movie. So moving on. Thanks for listening to my Challengers episode. But before we go, just some recommendations. So X-Men 97, my wife and I are still watching it. We are still loving it. The 3-part finale is shaping up to be insane. It's going to be amazing. What a great show. Aside from the drama with the creator, I'm sure it seems like he was fired for something serious. So although we would love to see him come back, if he did something serious, like obviously good riddance. And I think there's more than enough capable writers to keep this show going into season 2 and 3. I think they renewed it for a 3rd one already. But this show is really fantastic, really understands who the X-Men are, while also painting a brilliant portrait of what the comics should look like translated to screen. It does so in a better way than the Fox X-Men ever did. I put it up there with the first 2 X-Men. It's just very much in league with, pointing out the plight of the X-Men and doing it in a simple way. So yeah, love it. I'm very excited to see how that's going to play out. Speaking of finales, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry did a send-up of the Seinfeld finale for the Curb finale, and it's goofy, it's brilliant, it's actually a little introspective. which was really interesting. I didn't expect him to go there, but he did. He had a very cohesive theme. His writing was on point, and the Jerry Seinfeld appearance was very welcome. It's an hour-long finale. It does everything that it's supposed to, and then some. And it kind of puts a little twist on the Seinfeld finale in a way you wouldn't expect. So highly recommend. One of the greatest comedy writers of our time and one of the greatest comedy shows of our time. And then lastly, to kind of end on a sour note, the Quiet on Set documentary, my wife and I just finished it. It's pretty damning on Nickelodeon's mistreatment of children and on Dan Schneider and all the sex offenders that were part of that set. Just really horrendous stuff. If you don't want your childhood to be ruined, don't watch it. But I mean, really makes you recontextualize Drake and Josh and iCarly, and it really makes you like what happens with Drake Bell. It really makes you recontextualize Hollywood and just the overall business and the kind of people that are defended. So I highly recommend that. It's a very well done documentary. The journalist part of it, that they did an astounding job at gathering all this information and getting the kid actors to come back all grown up and recount their experience. So highly recommend that. But moving forward, next time I think I'll be covering The Fall Guy soon. I'm very excited for that one. Expect more videos coming out on my YouTube at John Dudley Speaks. I got another Kendrick Lamar Drake video coming because Kendrick will not stop dropping music, and I'm hoping that by the time that I drop it, that he doesn't release another song. The man's going insane right now. And coming up, I will have a Matrix video coming out soon. I plan on doing a recap of it for its 25th anniversary. Very excited about that one. And I'll be dropping a Christopher Nolan tier list. I'm very excited about that one as well. But yeah, keep your ears peeled and your eyes open, I guess. There's going to be a lot more not commentary. I guess commentary. There's going to be a lot of commentary and content coming your way. How about that? So stay tuned. I'll be in touch. Thanks for listening. This is John Dudley Speaks, the podcast. Bye-bye.